By the time Cole saw the dog, it had already been there for 3 days. Neighbors swore it hadn't eaten, hadn't moved more than a few inches, and hadn't let anyone close. The strange thing was, it wasn't guarding the house. It was watching the door. And when Cole stepped up onto the porch, the dog didn't growl. It stood, and looked right at him. The wind pushed cold needles into Cole's face as he crossed the yard. The old farmhouse stood at the far end of the snow-drifted lot, its paint worn to bare gray wood, windows boarded in uneven planks. The only sound was the crunch of his boots over ice, and even that felt too loud in the stillness. The dog sat at the top of the porch steps. Not sprawled in the lazy posture of an animal at rest. It sat upright, spine straight, head high, its dark eyes fixed on the weathered front door. Snow dusted its fur, melted in patches around its paws where body heat had fought the cold. Cole slowed before stepping onto the porch. He'd seen strays before, dogs chained up, even guard animals in war zones, but something about this one made his chest tighten. The canine's head turned just enough to look at him. Not a quick glance. It was slow, deliberate, and the moment their eyes met, Cole felt as if the dog had been waiting for him. "You out here alone, buddy?" His voice came out quieter than he intended. The dog didn't move toward him. Didn't growl. It turned its head back to the door. Cole followed its gaze. The door was heavy, old, its frame crooked from decades of weather. The paint was long gone, the wood dark with rot in places. A single lock sat under the knob, rust creeping around the keyhole. "Someone inside?" Cole asked, though the question felt strange in the frozen silence. The dog's ears twitched, but it didn't look at him again. Cole climbed the steps slowly, his boots hollow against the wood. The air was sharper up here, the smell of old pine boards mixing with something faint, almost metallic. He couldn't place it. He stopped a few feet from the dog, careful not to crowd it. It still didn't move. But now that he was closer, he could see the details. The collar was worn but intact, the leather darkened by years of use. A metal tag hung from it, but the engraving was so scratched he could only make out part of a name, Shad, before the rest vanished under deep gouges. Shadow? Cole guessed. The dog's ears twitched again, and it flicked its eyes toward him briefly before returning to the door. Cole stepped sideways, trying to look through the nearest boarded-up window. The boards were nailed tight, the gaps too narrow to see more than darkness inside. "Place looks abandoned," he murmured. But if it was, what was the dog waiting for? He considered trying the door, but something held him back. It wasn't fear exactly, more the heavy sense that this wasn't his choice to make. He glanced back toward the road. Snow had filled in his tracks almost completely. Out here, no one would see him if he stayed. No one would hear him if he called out. Cole turned back. The dog was watching him again now, not the door. And then, the sound came. Faint at first, so soft he thought it might be the wind in the boards. But it wasn't the wind. It was rhythmic. Slow. Tap. 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 Cole's eyes locked on the door. The sound was coming from the other side. The dog didn't move, but its tail twitched once, not wagging, just a short, sharp flick. He took a step closer to the door. "Hello?" The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in, thicker than before. Cole's instincts flared, the same prickling along his neck he'd felt in places where danger lay just beyond sight. He stepped back, but the porch boards groaned under his weight, breaking the stillness. That's when he heard it. Not tapping this time. A voice. Small. Quiet. Right on the other side of the door. "Don't let him in." Cole froze. The words were clear enough that he didn't doubt what he'd heard, though the tone, it was almost a whisper. He glanced at the dog, but Shadow, if that was his name, hadn't moved. His gaze stayed fixed on the door, unblinking. Cole's breath clouded in the cold air. "Who's in there?" Silence. He tried again, louder. "Do you need help?" This time, no voice answered. Just the creak of the house settling under the weight of snow. Cole backed toward the steps, thinking maybe he should call someone, the sheriff, animal control, anyone, but halfway down, the dog stood. It moved without hurry, stepping to the edge of the porch as if to block his path. It didn't growl, but the message was clear: don't leave. Cole stopped. The dog held his gaze, then turned back toward the door. The sound came again, not the voice, but a different noise now. A slow, deliberate slide of something heavy across the floor inside. Cole stepped back onto the porch without thinking. "Who's in there?" The dog's ears flattened slightly. It shifted closer to the door until its shoulder brushed the wood. Then, another sound. The faint click of a lock turning from the inside. Cole's hand went to the sidearm under his coat, a reflex he hadn't used in months. The door creaked inward an inch. Cold air slipped out, bringing with it that same metallic smell, stronger now. And in that inch-wide gap, he saw her. A girl. Maybe 14, pale skin against the dark of the interior. Her hair hung in tangled strands, her eyes huge and unblinking. She looked at him, then down at the dog, then back at him. Her voice was almost lost to the wind, but he caught the words. "You shouldn't be here." Then she opened the door wider. The door creaked wider, just enough for Cole to see more than her face. The girl's shoulders were hunched, her frame thin beneath a wool sweater that looked 2 sizes too big. Her bare feet stood on warped floorboards, toes pale in the cold. She didn't step back to invite him in, but she didn't close the door either. The dog, Shadow, moved first. Without hesitation, he padded across the threshold, brushing past her leg. She didn't flinch, only followed his movement with her eyes, as if tracking an ally. Cole stayed on the porch, hesitating. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl blinked slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she repeated, her voice flat but not hostile. Cole glanced past her. The interior was dim, lit only by gray light seeping through cracks in the boards nailed over the windows. The smell inside was stronger now, metallic, yes, but threaded with something faintly sour, like damp fabric left too long. He lowered his voice. "Is someone else in there?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back into the gloom, and the door swung wider in silent invitation. Cole's training told him not to cross a threshold blind. But leaving her here, barefoot, in the cold, with a dog that seemed tethered to her, wasn't an option. He stepped inside. The cold followed him in, though the air here wasn't as biting as outside. The boards groaned under his weight, and each sound seemed too loud in the stillness. Shadow stood a few feet ahead, his body angled toward the hallway that ran deeper into the house. His tail was stiff, ears pricked, the muscles in his shoulders tight. Cole's eyes adjusted to the dimness. The room they were in had once been a living room, he guessed. A sagging couch sat against the wall, its cushions torn and the stuffing spilling out. A wooden chair lay on its side near the fireplace, if it could be called that. The hearth was choked with ashes, the grate bent and warped as though it had been forced. On the wall above the fireplace, faint marks trailed in uneven lines. Not drawings. Not paint. Scratches. He turned back to the girl. "How long have you been here?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the scratches before returning to him. "A while." Cole's frown deepened. "Your parents?" She shook her head once, the motion so small it could have been a twitch. Shadow took 2 steps toward the hallway, then stopped. He looked back at the girl, then at Cole, as if waiting for one of them to lead. "What's down there?" Cole asked. The girl's gaze flicked toward the hall. She hesitated, then whispered, "Don't go there after dark." Cole glanced at the boarded-up windows. Outside, The daylight was already thin, the storm making it hard to tell how much time was left before nightfall. He shifted his stance, scanning for exits, noting the layout automatically: 2 windows in this room, 1 door behind him, the hallway ahead. The kitchen would likely be to the left, maybe a back door. The girl's bare feet made no sound as she crossed to the couch and sank onto it, pulling her knees up. She wrapped her arms around them, eyes on the dog as if Cole wasn't even in the room anymore. Shadow stayed alert, his head turning toward faint sounds from the hallway. A creak. Then another. Cole stepped closer to the girl. Is there someone else in this house? Her eyes slid toward him, then back to the hall. He waits until it's quiet. Cole's pulse ticked faster. Who? She pressed her lips together and didn't speak. He crouched in front of her, trying to meet her gaze. Look, I'm here to help. But I need to know if you're in danger. Her eyes finally locked on his. And for the first time, he saw fear there. I'm not the one he's waiting for. A floorboard popped somewhere down the hallway. Cole stood slowly, his hand brushing against the grip of his sidearm under his coat. Stay here, he told her. She shook her head sharply. Don't. Shadow made a low sound, not quite a growl, but close. His stance widened, weight shifting to his back legs as if preparing to move. Cole glanced once more at the girl, then started toward the hall. The boards underfoot were uneven, some soft with age, others bowed upward. The hallway was narrow, the walls close enough that his shoulders brushed peeling wallpaper. Halfway down, he caught the smell again, sharper now, enough to sting the back of his throat. A faint draft stirred the hair at his temple, but there were no open windows here. At the end of the hall was a door. Closed. Cole reached for the knob, but before his fingers touched it, the girl's voice cut through the stillness. Don't open it. He turned. She was still on the couch, knees drawn up, her eyes huge in the dim light. Why not? Her voice was barely audible. Because then it knows you're here. Cole looked at Shadow. The dog's body was rigid, his head low, ears flat against his skull. His gaze was fixed on the door at the end of the hall, his breathing slow but deliberate. Cole stepped back, returning to the living room. The girl didn't relax. Her eyes tracked the hallway until he was seated across from her. You've been here for days, he said. What happens when night comes? She looked at the dog instead of him. Ask him. Shadow's tail flicked once. Then the boards in the hallway creaked again, 3 slow steps, moving closer. And yet, the door at the end remained closed. The sound in the hallway stopped. Not faded, not shifted, stopped. As if whoever, or whatever, had been moving was now standing perfectly still. Cole stayed where he was, the weight of the girl's stare heavy on him. Shadow hadn't moved, but the fur along his spine was raised, a faint ridge visible even in the dim light. For a long moment, the house seemed to hold its breath. The storm outside howled faintly against the boarded windows, but inside there was only stillness. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud, 3 slow, deliberate taps against the closed door at the end of the hallway. The girl flinched. Not violently, but enough for Cole to notice. Shadow didn't bark. Instead, he shifted forward, placing himself between the girl and the hallway. His paws were steady, stance wide, eyes locked on that door. Cole leaned slightly, keeping his voice low. Who's in there? The girl shook her head once, her eyes dropping to her knees. The knock came again. Louder this time. 3 taps, evenly spaced, almost measured. Cole rose to his feet, instinct pushing him toward the sound, but Shadow's low, rumbling growl cut through the room. It wasn't aimed at the door alone, it was aimed at him, as if warning him not to take another step. Cole paused, studying the dog. His stance wasn't aggressive toward Cole, it was protective. The warning wasn't for himself. It was for the girl. Cole looked at her. Is this why the dog's been at the door for days? Waiting for you to, he trailed off, realizing he didn't have the right words. To be ready to leave? She didn't answer. Instead, her eyes flicked to the boarded window to her left, as if checking the outside. The knock came a third time. Louder still. But this time, it didn't stop after 3. The sound continued, slow but relentless, tap, 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 the rhythm somehow even more unnerving than if it had been frantic. Cole stepped toward the hallway again, ignoring the heat of Shadow's stare on his back. The air grew colder with each step, and the metallic smell thickened. Halfway down, he stopped. Something about the rhythm had changed. It wasn't the same each time, the intervals were just slightly off now, like whoever was knocking was listening in between taps. He took one more step. The tapping stopped. From the other side of the door came a sound so faint he thought at first it was just the house settling, a long, slow inhale. Someone was breathing in there. Cole's grip tightened on the pistol under his coat, but he didn't draw. He turned back to the girl. "You've been here with that in the house?" Her voice was low, but the words were clear. "It's been here longer than me." Cole's pulse thudded harder in his ears. "What is it?" She looked down again, avoiding his eyes. "If you open the door, it knows you. It remembers." "That's not an answer," he said. "It's the only one you'll get." A dull thud hit the door at the end of the hallway. Not a knock this time, more like a palm or shoulder pressed hard against it. The wood groaned. Shadow barked once, sharp and loud, the sound echoing off the walls. Cole backed away from the hall, retreating to the living room. "All right," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "We're not opening it. But we need to figure out how to get you out of here." The girl didn't look relieved. If anything, her shoulders tightened more. "It doesn't let you leave easy." Cole's gaze flicked to the front door. "The dog came in when you opened it for me. Has he left before?" Her eyes lifted just enough to meet his. "He leaves when it's safe. But it's not safe now." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the boards over the windows. Snowflakes drifted through the smallest gaps, dusting the warped floor. Cole knelt in front of her again. "You've got a coat? Boots?" Her silence was answer enough. He looked at Shadow. "If I carry her." Shadow barked again, cutting him off. His eyes weren't on Cole this time, they were fixed on the boarded window beside the couch. Cole followed his gaze. A shadow passed behind the boards. Not outside, inside, moving between the gaps, tall enough to blot out the faint light seeping through. Cole stood instantly, moving so he was between the girl and the window. "We're not alone in this room." She didn't move from the couch, didn't even look toward the boards. "It can move wherever it wants when it's dark." "It's not dark," Cole said. She didn't answer. The boards over the window creaked as something pressed against them from the other side. Not the outside, he could hear the faint scrape of wood from within the wall itself. Shadow's bark turned into a deep, steady growl, his body tense and ready. Cole's hand went to the pistol again, this time drawing it. "All right," he murmured to the dog. "If it comes through, we don't hesitate." The girl's voice cut through the tension, so quiet he almost missed it. "If you shoot it, it learns your sound." Cole froze. "What?" Her eyes locked on his now. "Then it finds you again. Even if you run." The boards stopped creaking. The air went still. Then, from the hallway, the breathing started again. The breathing deep in the hallway was steady, slow, and deliberate, like someone making sure he could hear it. Cole stayed still, his pistol raised, eyes shifting between the hallway and the window boards that had just gone quiet. Shadow's growl deepened, his teeth bared now, the sound vibrating low in his chest. Cole took a slow breath. "All right," he murmured to the dog, "we keep them between us and the front door. Stay sharp." But before he could move the girl toward the exit, the boards over the window beside her groaned again, this time warping outward as if something inside the wall itself was pressing against them. The nails squealed against the wood, one bending sideways before snapping free. The girl didn't scream. She just pulled her knees tighter and whispered, "It's looking for the warm place." Cole's eyes snapped to her. "What?" "That's where it pulls you through," she said, her voice calm but her gaze fixed somewhere far away. A sudden bang shook the wall, the boards flexing so hard snow sifted down from the edges. Shadow lunged toward it, barking so sharply the sound seemed to cut the air. "Move!" Cole barked, grabbing the girl by the arm and pulling her to her feet. She stumbled, her bare toes scraping over splinters on the floor. They made it 2 steps toward the front door before the noise came from the hallway again, not just breathing now, but movement. Heavy footfalls on warped boards, each one making the house groan like the wood was straining under the weight. Cole's instincts screamed at him, they were being herded. The wall attack had been a push to drive them away from the window, toward the hallway. "Back corner," he ordered, pushing the girl toward the farthest point of the living room. Shadow followed instantly, positioning himself between her and the hallway. Cole kept his pistol trained on the opening where the hall met the living room. The footsteps stopped just short of it, as though whoever, or whatever, was there could see him but chose not to step into the light. The girl's voice came soft behind him. "It likes when you think you have space." A low scraping sound came from the hall, like fingernails dragging across wood. It started at the baseboard and moved up slowly, deliberately, until it reached the height of his chest, then stopped. Cole's breath clouded in the air. "I've seen worse," he lied. Shadow barked once, sharp enough to make the sound stop. For a moment, the house was still again. The storm outside howled faintly, snow pelting the boards. Cole began edging toward the front door, one hand still gripping the girl's arm. Then the wall behind them, the one with the couch, let out a hollow thump. Cole turned sharply. The girl had gone pale, her eyes locked on the wood behind the couch. "It's here," she whispered. A bulge pushed outward from the wall, swelling the old wallpaper until it tore. Dust rained down as whatever was inside pressed harder, the shape indistinct but wrong, too tall, too narrow at the middle, bending where it shouldn't. Shadow lunged again, barking viciously at the wall. The girl's voice rose just above the sound. "It's not trying to get you yet. It's trying to get me." Cole didn't think, he just acted. "We're leaving. Now." He moved her toward the door, but the bulge in the wall slid, fast, following their movement. The boards under their feet creaked like something heavy was crawling through the inside of the walls, matching their steps perfectly. Halfway to the door, the bulge stopped. Then came the sound, nails, claws, something sharp dragging along the inside of the wall, circling them. Cole yanked the door handle. Locked. His gut dropped. "You lock this?" The girl shook her head quickly. "It locks itself." Behind them, the scraping turned into pounding. The wall shuddered with each hit, dust falling in thick streams from the ceiling. Cole slammed his shoulder against the door. The wood held. He did it again, harder, the impact jolting through his ribs. Shadow barked and spun toward the hallway, something was moving there again, faster now. Cole's pulse pounded in his ears. He could fight whatever was in the hall, or he could keep breaking the door. Both felt like losing options. The girl's voice cut through his thoughts. "You can't make it leave. You have to trick it." "What does that mean?" Cole barked. She stepped forward, bare feet on the cold boards, and pressed her hand flat against the front door. "It doesn't like when you stop running." Cole glanced at her, confused, then the pounding stopped. The silence that followed was so abrupt it made his skin crawl. Shadow froze. His ears twitched. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of the door at the end opening. The creak of old hinges filled the air, followed by something dragging across the floor. Cole grabbed her arm again. "Whatever you mean by tricking it, make it quick." Her eyes flicked to the black K9. "He knows the way." Shadow barked once, turned, and sprinted toward the kitchen. The thing in the hallway began to move faster. Shadow moved like a shot, claws clicking against the warped boards as he barreled through the narrow doorway into the kitchen. Cole pulled the girl after him, glancing over his shoulder just in time to see the bulge in the wall sink back in, leaving only torn wallpaper and a faint dust haze in the air. But it wasn't retreating. It was repositioning. The hallway behind them groaned under heavy footfalls, fast, uneven, almost a stagger, but gaining speed. "Move!" Cole urged, his boots skidding over the warped floor as they crossed into the kitchen. The room was colder than the rest of the house, the air sharp enough to sting his lungs. Faded linoleum curled at the edges where it met the walls, and a dead bulb swung faintly from the ceiling, the cord creaking with each sway. Shadow stopped at the back door. He didn't scratch, didn't bark, he simply stood there, staring at it, tail stiff, ears back. Cole reached for the handle. It was iced over. Frost laced the edges of the doorframe, thick enough to crunch under his glove. He twisted the handle once, nothing. Locked from the outside. The pounding from the hallway was closer now, reverberating through the floorboards under his feet. He tried his shoulder against the door. The frame rattled but held. Shadow's head snapped to the left, toward a narrow pantry door at the far end of the kitchen. He barked once, sharp, insistent. Cole's gut told him what that meant. "That's not a way out," he muttered. The girl shook her head. "It's a way around." Another crash from the hallway, louder, closer. Cole pictured the distance. Whatever was in the hall would be in the kitchen in seconds. He moved to the pantry door, yanked it open. Cold, stale air spilled out, heavy with the scent of dust and old wood. Shelves lined the walls, but the back was just empty space. "Where does it go?" he demanded. The girl didn't answer, Shadow did. He slipped inside, disappearing into the dark. Cole crouched to follow, guiding the girl ahead of him. His shoulders brushed the shelving on both sides, the wood groaning faintly under his weight. The cold deepened with each step until his breath fogged so thick he could barely see her outline ahead. Behind them, the pounding stopped. The silence that followed was wrong, too sudden, too absolute. Cole turned his head toward the kitchen entrance, straining to hear. The boards creaked once. Slowly. Then, something scraped along the pantry doorway. Not wood on wood, something softer, almost a fabric-like drag, slow and deliberate. The girl froze in front of him. "Keep moving," he whispered. She did, but the sound followed, faint, just beyond the doorway. The passage narrowed into what looked like an old service corridor, barely wide enough for him to fit. His shoulders scraped against the plaster walls, flaking it away in pale curls. Shadow was only a few feet ahead now, his shape a black silhouette against the dim gray light filtering from somewhere far forward. The girl's breathing was quickening. Cole reached out, steadying her with a hand on her back. "Almost there," he muttered. The corridor bent sharply to the right. They followed it, emerging into a small mudroom with a single window, and no door. Cole swore under his breath. The glass in the window was coated with frost, the pattern thick and jagged. He wiped a glove over it, but the ice didn't clear. Behind them, the sound came again, this time from inside the corridor they'd just exited. Soft, steady footfalls. Not running, not rushing. Just closing in. Shadow turned toward the noise, ears forward, muscles tight. Cole searched the mudroom. No weapons. No tools. Nothing but a coat rack with a single tattered jacket hanging limp. The girl moved toward the window. "We can get through." "It's solid ice," Cole said. She shook her head. Not if you don't touch the middle. He frowned. Why not? Her voice was so quiet he almost didn't catch it. Because that's where it's warm. The footsteps in the corridor stopped. Cole stepped toward the window anyway, ignoring her warning. He tapped the middle with the barrel of his pistol, solid. A dull thump answered him from the other side. Shadow's bark exploded through the room, startling both of them. He launched forward, putting himself between Cole and the glass. The thump came again. This time, faint heat radiated from the center of the ice. The girl was backing toward the farthest wall now, shaking her head. You can't open it. It opens you. Cole's skin prickled. He'd dealt with traps, ambushes, even the occasional booby-trapped building. But nothing about this made tactical sense: the heat, the placement, the deliberate stillness of whatever was inside. The silence broke with a sound from the corridor, a long, scraping drag, like something pulling itself forward on its elbows. Shadow snarled, moving toward it. Cole grabbed the girl's arm. We're going back. She resisted for a second, but the drag in the corridor quickened, the sound echoing against the plaster. They slipped back into the narrow passage, Cole keeping her ahead of him. The darkness was heavier now, the air colder, the floor underfoot damp. Halfway through, something shifted in the wall beside them. A hollow knock, followed by another, right at the height of his head. Cole didn't slow, forcing them forward until the faint shape of the pantry doorway appeared ahead. Shadow burst out first, then the girl. Cole was halfway through when something brushed his shoulder from the dark. Not a hand. Not exactly. Something too cold, too smooth, with the faintest catch like wet fabric. He shoved through, slamming the pantry door shut behind him. The pounding started again immediately. The pantry door shook under each pounding blow, dust raining from the frame. Cole braced his shoulder against it, but each hit rattled through his bones. Shadow stood just ahead of him, body low, ears pinned, a deep growl rolling from his chest. The girl had retreated to the farthest corner of the kitchen, her knees drawn up under her chin. Cole's breath came fast, the cold air cutting through his lungs. We can't just keep moving from room to room, he said, more to himself than to them. The pounding stopped suddenly. That silence again, heavy, expectant. Shadow's growl deepened. His eyes flicked from the pantry door to the boarded window near the sink, then back again. Cole spoke low, steady. If it comes through, we hit it hard enough to make it think twice. The girl's voice was flat. It doesn't think twice. Cole ignored her. His hand went to the counter, sweeping aside old cans and debris until he found what he needed, a rusted cast iron pan, still solid despite years of neglect. Heavy enough to swing like a hammer. The boards over the kitchen window gave a faint creak, pulling Cole's attention. He moved toward it, pistol raised, shadow shifting to follow. Outside, snow fell in lazy sheets. But between the flakes, he caught movement, not fast, not frantic, just pacing. Too tall to be a stray animal. Too slow to be human. He stepped back. We've got more than one problem. A single knock came from the pantry door. Soft. Measured. Cole froze. The knock came again, slightly louder. Shadow's fur rose along his spine. Then a third knock, not on the pantry door this time, but from inside the kitchen wall to his left. Cole's mind raced. 2 points of contact. It was either moving impossibly fast between them, or there was more than one. The girl spoke without lifting her head. If you see two, it's already too late. Good thing I don't believe in that, Cole said, trying to keep the edge out of his voice. The pounding came back, but now from the kitchen wall and the pantry door at once. Each hit in perfect rhythm, like two fists slamming the house's ribs. The boards over the window began to rattle. Nails squealed as they loosened. Cole's pulse kicked into high gear. He shifted his stance, pistol in his right hand, pan in his left. Shadow moved to the space between the pantry and the window, ready to lunge either way. The pantry door buckled inward, wood splintering. A dark gap opened near the bottom, not wide enough to see through, but enough for something pale to push in. It was a hand. Long fingers. Skin too smooth and too cold-looking, like porcelain left out in frost. Cole didn't hesitate, he swung the pan down hard. The contact rang out like a dull bell. The fingers withdrew instantly, leaving faint grooves in the wood where the nails had pressed. From the wall to his left came a scraping sound, fast and sharp. Shadow lunged toward it, barking in rapid bursts, his teeth snapping at the bulging plaster. Cole pivoted, pistol raised. The wall bulged outward suddenly, cracking along the center. For the first time, he saw a glimpse of something through the plaster, not skin, not wood, but a single, unblinking black eye staring back at him. He fired once. The blast filled the kitchen, plaster exploding outward. But when the dust settled, the wall was empty. From the pantry came a deep, slow inhale. Cole turned back just in time to see the gap at the bottom widen again, not a hand this time, but something sliding through. The shape was thin, too thin, bending in a way that made his stomach knot. He swung the pan again, but this time it didn't pull back. The thing inside braced itself, pushing harder. Shadow leapt forward, his jaws clamping around the pale shape. His growl turned into a savage shake, his muscles straining as he pulled. There was a sound then, high-pitched, almost like metal under tension, and the shape retreated suddenly, vanishing into the dark. The pounding stopped. The boards over the window stilled. For a moment, the only sound was Shadow's ragged panting. Cole knelt beside him, checking for blood. "You all right?" The dog's chest rose and fell quickly, but he stood firm, eyes locked on the pantry door. The girl spoke again, her voice still soft. "It knows you now." Cole looked over his shoulder. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The way she was staring past him, her eyes fixed on something only she could see, told him enough. Shadow's ears twitched. His head turned toward the ceiling. Above them, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of something crawling. The sound in the ceiling wasn't just movement, it was deliberate. Slow, careful drags, like something using its elbows to pull itself along just inches above the plaster. Every few seconds it would stop, then resume, always shifting just far enough to stay directly over their heads. Shadow's gaze was locked upward, his body rigid. His ears tracked every scrape. Cole could feel the vibration of each movement faintly through his boots, the old beams transferring the sound down into the frame of the house. The girl still sat in the far corner, but her eyes weren't on the ceiling. She was looking at the kitchen doorway. Cole followed her gaze and saw nothing, just the dim hall beyond. He made a decision. We take it to higher ground. If it's moving up there, we cut it off before it gets wherever it's going. Her voice was barely above a whisper. It's already where it's going. Cole didn't answer. He gave Shadow a nod toward the hall. The dog moved immediately, slipping out of the kitchen and padding toward the narrow staircase just beyond the living room. Cole followed, pulling the girl after him despite her resistance. The stairs groaned under their weight, each step releasing a puff of stale dust into the air. The smell up here was different, older, more sour, like wood that had been wet too long and left to rot. Halfway up, Cole froze. The movement above had stopped. Shadow stopped too, his head tilting toward the ceiling. Cole strained his ears. The house had gone dead silent. No crawling, no creaking. Just the sound of his own breath. The girl shifted uncomfortably, glancing over her shoulder toward the bottom of the stairs. "If you go up, you won't come back the same." Cole gave her a tight look. "I've been hearing versions of that all night. Hasn't stopped me yet." They reached the landing. The upstairs hall was long and narrow, with faded floral wallpaper peeling in strips from the walls. 2 doors on the left, one at the far end. The air was colder here, cold enough that his breath lingered like smoke. Shadow moved ahead, sniffing the floorboards. His claws clicked softly as he padded toward the second door on the left. Cole followed, pistol raised. The boards under his feet dipped slightly, as though something heavy had been resting there recently. He reached the door. The knob was loose, spinning halfway before catching. He pushed it open slowly, the hinges squealing in protest. The room beyond was empty. No furniture, no windows, just bare wooden walls. But the ceiling was lower than it should have been, almost pressing down on the space. Shadow growled. Not at the room, at the far wall. Cole stepped in. The floor was warped, curving slightly toward the corner where 2 walls met. The air here was stale, unmoving. Then he saw it, faint, almost hidden, a seam running vertically down the corner. He approached, running his gloved fingers over it. The seam was cold, colder than the rest of the wall. From behind the wall came the faintest sound, a breath. Shadow lunged forward, barking sharply. The sound on the other side stopped. Cole took a step back. His instincts screamed at him, this was a choke point. If he forced it open, he'd be face to face with whatever was inside. But before he could decide, the floor under his boots shifted. Not sagged. Shifted. He stumbled, catching himself on the wall. The boards had moved sideways, just enough to make him realize they weren't nailed down at all. He glanced at Shadow. The dog was rigid now, ears forward, staring down at the boards like they might move again. The girl's voice drifted in from the hallway. That's how it gets you upstairs. You think you're standing still, but you're not. Cole frowned. What does that mean? She stepped into the doorway, her bare feet pale against the dark wood. The room moves. It's not where you think it is anymore. He turned back to the wall seam. It hadn't changed, but the light from the hall was dimmer now, like the doorway was farther away than it had been a moment ago. Shadow barked once, short and urgent. Cole made a snap choice. We're leaving. He backed toward the doorway, keeping his eyes on the seam. But when he reached the hall, something was wrong. The hallway stretched farther than before. The first door, the one closest to the stairs, was gone. In its place was another long stretch of wall, the wallpaper the same faded floral pattern repeating in a way that made his head swim. The girl stood beside him, calm, like she'd seen this before. You can't walk out. You have to break it. Shadow moved to the far end of the hall, barking toward the single door there. Cole didn't like the feel of it. The hall seemed to narrow the farther it went, the floor sloping down slightly as if leading into something. But with the stairs gone, it was the only path left. They started down the hall. The boards creaked under their weight, each step sounding like it echoed too long. Halfway down, the ceiling above them groaned. Then, from directly over their heads, came the sound of nails scratching, fast and frantic, moving with them step for step. Cole didn't look up. Move faster. Shadow broke into a run, reaching the door first. He stopped there, barking once, then looking back at Cole. Cole caught up and grabbed the handle. Cold bit into his skin even through the glove. He turned it, unlocked. The door swung inward to reveal a set of narrow stairs, leading down into darkness. From behind them, the scratching in the ceiling stopped. From ahead, down those stairs, came a single knock. The first step down was like crossing a threshold into another temperature entirely. The upstairs hallway had been cold, but this was breath-stealing. Each inhale burned like ice water down Cole's throat, and the dampness in the air clung to his skin as though he'd stepped into a cave. Shadow didn't hesitate. He bounded down the narrow staircase, each paw thudding on the wood, the sound muffled almost immediately as though the walls swallowed it. Cole kept the girl between them, one hand on her shoulder to steady her. The stairwell curved gently to the right, making it impossible to see the bottom. The walls here weren't plaster, they were raw wood, but wet, as if water had seeped in over years without ever drying. Halfway down, the light from above began to dim. Cole glanced back. The open door they'd left at the top was still there, but the light spilling through was fainter now, tinted gray, like the weather outside had changed. The girl spoke without looking at him. "It's not the same house anymore." Cole frowned. "It's the same house. You're just..." The step under his boot creaked differently, hollow, like there was nothing beneath it. He froze. Shadow stopped 2 steps ahead, ears swiveling back toward him. Cole crouched, pressing his palm against the tread. The wood flexed, soft, almost spongy. He shifted his weight forward slowly. The board didn't break, but it sank slightly, and from somewhere far below, he heard water drip. The girl's voice was barely audible. "Don't stop here." He didn't. They continued down, and as they rounded the bend, a faint glow appeared below, not warm, not from a bulb, but a pale blue-white light that seemed to pulse gently. It cast faint shadows that moved like they were underwater. Cole reached the bottom step and stopped dead. They were in a hallway again, but not like any part of the house they'd seen before. The walls here were smooth, almost polished, the wood dark and wet-looking. The floor wasn't wood at all, but packed earth, uneven and cold beneath his boots. Shadow moved cautiously, sniffing the ground, then the air. His ears kept twitching, as though hearing something Cole couldn't. The girl pointed toward the end of the hall, where the pale light seemed brightest. "That's where it's waiting." Cole studied her face. She wasn't scared. Not anymore. "What's down there?" he asked. Her gaze didn't waver. "It's where it started." A faint sound interrupted her, a low, rhythmic thump. It wasn't footsteps. It was heavier, slower, like something beating once every few seconds. Shadow's hackles rose. Cole kept his pistol raised, advancing slowly. The hallway felt longer than it should, each step stretching the distance instead of closing it. The air grew thicker, colder, until even his breath seemed to fall heavy to the ground. When they finally reached the end, Cole saw the source of the light, a door. It was wrong. Not just because it was made of smooth, seamless wood without hinges or a handle, but because the light wasn't coming from around it, it was coming through it, bleeding in faint veins across the surface like cracks in ice. The thumping sound came again, and this time he could feel it in his chest. Shadow barked sharply, stepping between Cole and the door. Cole glanced at the girl. "If this is where it started, then maybe ending it here gets us out." Her lips curled into the faintest, humorless smile. "You think it ends?" The thump came again, louder, faster. Shadow's barking turned frantic. He backed up slightly, pressing himself between Cole and the door. Cole stepped forward anyway. He raised his boot and slammed it against the wood. The sound that came back wasn't solid. It was hollow. And then, from behind them, something moved. Cole turned. The hallway they'd just come down wasn't empty anymore. At the farthest bend, just visible in the pale light, a figure stood. Tall. Thin. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, arms hanging too long at its sides. It didn't move. Cole aimed his pistol. "Stay behind me," he told the girl. She didn't move either. The figure took one step forward. The sound of its footfall was wrong, not a thud, but a wet, dragging scrape. Shadow growled, his entire body vibrating with it. Cole fired once. The blast lit the hallway for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, the figure was closer. He fired again. Closer. The door behind them thumped once more, this time so hard the light in its veins flared bright enough to sting his eyes. The figure stopped advancing. Its head tilted back, mouth opening wide enough to split its face unnaturally. From it came a sound, not a scream, but a long, hollow exhale, like air being sucked out of the hallway. The light in the door flared again. And then, without warning, the figure dropped to all fours and rushed them. Shadow launched forward, colliding with it halfway down the hall. The impact was sickening, not bone on bone, but something softer, heavier. The girl moved then, not toward Cole, but toward the door. He spun toward her. "What are you doing?" She pressed her hands to the wood. The light flared even brighter, running up her arms like veins under her skin. Cole reached for her, but the thumping sound in the door became a rapid pounding, shaking the walls, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Shadow's snarls and the thing's guttural hiss filled the air, mixing into a sound that made Cole's head pound. The girl turned her head slightly toward him. Her voice was calm, steady. "It won't let you leave unless it takes something back." And with that, the door split open. The wood didn't splinter when it broke, it peeled, curling back like the rind of some enormous fruit. Strips of it curled outward in slow motion, the pale blue light spilling out brighter and brighter until Cole had to shield his eyes. The temperature dropped so fast his breath crystallized in front of him. Shadow was still locked in a violent struggle with the thing from the hall, their bodies slamming into the wet boards with dull, meaty impacts. Each time Shadow tore into it, the thing made no scream, only that horrible, hollow exhale that seemed to suck the air out of the room. Cole's instincts screamed to help the dog, but the girl was stepping into the light now, and every muscle in his body told him that letting her cross that threshold would be the worst possible mistake. "Stop," he shouted, lunging toward her. The blue glow hit him like a physical force. His vision swam, his ears filled with a low, thrumming pulse. It wasn't just sound, it was in his chest, in his teeth, vibrating every bone in his body. When his vision cleared, he was standing in something that wasn't the hallway anymore. It looked like a forest at night. But the trees were wrong, too thin, their bark pale as bone, twisting in shapes that made no sense, their branches curling upward like grasping fingers. The ground was soft, almost spongy, and the air smelled faintly metallic. The girl was about 10 feet ahead of him, barefoot, her nightdress clinging to her in the damp air. She didn't look back. Shadow was gone. The thing he'd been fighting was gone. Cole's gut churned. He spun around, expecting to see the door, but there was nothing behind him except more trees, fading into darkness. A whisper curled through the air. Not words. Just sound. The girl stopped walking. Slowly, she turned her head toward him, but her eyes weren't the same. They were black now, not just the irises, the entire sclera, deep and lightless. Cole raised his pistol instinctively. Her voice was soft, but it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "It's been waiting so long." A cold wind slid between the trees, and with it came movement. Figures began stepping out from behind the pale trunks, tall, thin shapes, each with heads that tilted too far, their arms hanging limp. They didn't rush him. They just stood, encircling the space, their faces hidden in shadow except for faint glints where their eyes should be. Cole's breathing quickened. He kept the pistol moving from one to another, but there were too many, and the circle was closing in. The girl took another step toward him, her bare feet silent on the strange ground. "It doesn't want me anymore," she said, her head tilting in a way that mirrored the figures. "It wants you." Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. "Not happening." A low growl rolled through the dark. Cole froze. That sound, he knew it. Shadow stepped into the circle from the left, his black fur bristling, his teeth bared. His eyes locked on Cole for a brief moment, then shifted to the figures. They reacted, subtly, but enough. Heads tilted back. Some stepped away. The girl's smile faltered. Shadow moved between Cole and her, planting himself firmly. The growl deepened until it was a vibrating hum in the still air. The figures stopped advancing. The wind shifted, and Cole felt a pull at his back, Not physical, but insistent. He turned his head just enough to see it, a seam of light in the air behind him, faint but there. The door. It was still open. The girl's expression hardened. If you leave, it will follow you. Cole didn't respond. He stepped back slowly, shadow keeping pace, his body never turning away from the girl or the circle of figures. Her voice rose, not in anger, but in desperation. If you leave it hungry, it will find another door. Another town. You think it sat at that farmhouse for me? Cole's boots touched the seam of light. The air here was warmer, cleaner, the metallic scent fading. Shadow glanced up at him. Cole made his choice. He stepped backward through the seam. The cold vanished instantly. He was back in the underground hallway, Shadow beside him. The girl was gone. The glowing door was sealed, smooth again, as though it had never opened. Cole stared at it, chest heaving. From the other side came one single knock. Then silence. The silence after that single knock was worse than the noise that had come before. Cole stood frozen, pistol still raised toward the door that no longer glowed. The wood looked ordinary now, the same damp, dark boards that lined the rest of the hallway. Shadow was pressed against his leg, his muscles tight as cable, ears locked forward. Cole could feel the dog's breathing, sharp, controlled, as if he was waiting for something to move again. But nothing did. Cole slowly lowered his weapon. Every instinct told him it wasn't over, that the quiet was deliberate. He looked up and down the hallway. No sign of the thing they'd fought. No sign of the girl. Just the packed earth floor and the warped boards above. What the hell was that? He muttered, mostly to himself. Shadow gave a low whine and turned toward the way they'd come. Cole followed, but after only a few steps, he stopped. The hallway looked shorter now. The bend they'd turned earlier to find this place was gone. In its place was a narrow set of stairs leading straight up. Cole didn't like how easy that felt. He glanced over his shoulder one last time. The door sat there, still and unremarkable. But his gut told him it was watching him in some way he couldn't understand. Shadow barked once, sharp and impatient. They climbed. The stairs were steeper than before, the air warming slightly with each step. After only a dozen or so, Cole pushed open a hatch and stepped into the kitchen. The farmhouse kitchen. Exactly as it had been when they first came inside. The back door was open now, letting in a gust of freezing wind that rattled the hanging pans. Cole stood still, scanning for any sign of movement. Nothing. He walked toward the door, Shadow following close. The snow outside was falling harder, the sky a flat, oppressive gray. Cole stepped onto the porch. The yard looked untouched, no footprints except the ones they'd left when they'd arrived. The world felt muted, like sound didn't travel as far here. Shadow trotted a few feet ahead, then stopped and turned, looking back at him with that same intense stare he'd had the first time Cole saw him at this door. Cole's mind ran through the options. Burn the place down? Seal it and warn the town? Walk away and hope the thing inside stayed locked forever? None of them felt right. Shadow whined again, then looked past Cole, toward the door. Cole turned. In the doorway stood the girl. Barefoot. Pale. No frost on her, no sign she'd just stepped into the snow. Her nightdress hung limp at her sides, her black hair tangled around her face. Her expression was unreadable. Cole took a step forward, but she raised her hand, palm out. Don't. Her voice was steady. Cole stopped. How did you? You left it hungry, she said, cutting him off. It will find another way. Cole's grip on his pistol tightened. Then help me stop it. The faintest smile touched her lips, not friendly, not cruel, just knowing. You can't stop what you can't follow. She stepped back into the shadow of the doorway, and for the briefest moment, Her eyes flashed that same unnatural black he'd seen in the forest. Then she was gone. Cole moved fast, crossing the porch and pushing into the kitchen. Empty. The house was silent again. Shadow padded in after him, sniffing the air. The dog's ears twitched, but he didn't growl. Cole turned in a slow circle. The kitchen was as still as it had been before. But something was different. The smell. It wasn't the musty scent of rot anymore. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, a metallic tang, like the air on the other side of that door. Cole crouched beside Shadow, his eyes scanning the floor. In the thin layer of dust, fresh paw prints led deeper into the house. Not Shadow's. Bigger. He straightened, his jaw tightening. The farmhouse wasn't empty. Not anymore. Shadow looked at him, ears forward, tail low. The dog didn't need to bark, Cole already knew they weren't done. Not tonight. Not ever. He stepped back onto the porch, the cold wind stinging his face. The snow was already covering their earlier footprints. In the distance, past the yard and the tree-line, the world was quiet. Too quiet. Cole pulled his coat tighter around him, his eyes on the house. "We'll come back," he told Shadow. The dog didn't move. Just kept staring at the door. And as Cole turned to walk away, he swore he heard it, a single, muffled knock from somewhere deep inside the house.